There is so much more attention to Nauryz in general. It's very important to keep some traditions that are not borrowed or imported, but that are ours.
So I don't think we should be super afraid of what globalization is bringing to us.
Don't you think that our identity sometimes can put us in a box?
Wow.
Welcome to the Astana Times Unplugged podcast, where we break down complicated things into simpler terms. Today, myself, Aida, and my colleagues, Aysel and Aybashin, will talk about Nauryz, and not only.
So Nauryz isn't just a holiday, it's a story. It's a story of renewal, connection, and remembering who we are. So tonight, we're gonna uncover this all.
In this episode, we haven't invited any expert guests. Instead, it's just three of us, journalists, colleagues, and friends, because Nauryz is a topic very close to our heart, and I'm sure to the heart of our citizens.
Well, girls, let's talk about Nauryz. And my first question will be, what do you remember about growing up and celebrating Nauryz? For example, I will, start with myself. When I talked to my mom before shooting this episode, she told me that in our family, because when I was really small, I don't remember many things from my childhood, but she said we've always celebrated Nauryz. Nauryz Kuzhe, a star dish of Nauryz holiday, was always on our tables. So it's very interesting that, there are families that didn't celebrate Nauryz, for example. In my family, it was like a staple holiday, and maybe also because my mom was born on the 21st of March.
Oh, really?
Yeah, maybe this, because it coincided with her, birthday. It was a big thing in our family. And personally, for me, Nauryz is like, it's becoming, as I'm getting older, much closer, because, when you start New Year at January 1st, I don't really feel like it's a new year.
Mm-hmm.
While when I celebrate it in March, in spring, it feels like the whole earth is like, starting to waken up from winter.
Mm-hmm.
So this feels much closer to me as a start of the new year. So
it's very interesting to hear your story, because we both come from northern part of the country,
yes, exactly.
Which usually is known among locals as not very much connected to traditions. Because the way I remember Nauryz, I actually don't remember it quite well. The only memory that I have is, these concerts at schools, or singing the national anthem, or going with my family to the city center, eating shashliks, kebabs, and some stuff like this. But what I remember just yesterday, just some core memory uncovered in my head, is I remember my grandmother, so my dad's mom, she was cooking Nauryz Kuzhe. Back then, I had no idea. I was like, what is it about? Why we need so many stuff in there?
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't able to make my mind about it. But then I remember now, and I remember how she was, she was so careful about gathering all ingredients, but she wasn't suppressing any other to join her and help her. She was just cooking for us, and we were drinking it all together. But it was a very weird taste for me, because it felt like a drink, but at the same time it tasted like soup. So yeah, it's a very interesting
It can become very sour sometimes, especially if you add katık or something, or kurt, what we call the salty additive.
What about you, Aybashin?
Well, I see that I'm joined by two northern girls. I come from south. I come from Almaty. And what I remember in Almaty, it was a lot of celebrations during the Nauryz. Maybe because it's a big city, just as Astana is. So what I remember is that it wasn't much about family celebration. You said that now Nauryz is replacing New Year for you,
yes.
Right? Well, for me, it wasn't back then like that. And probably even now, it's not as grand celebration as New Year in our family. But what I remember is we went to gatherings and concerts. So me, my classmates, it's usually a holiday time. We're out of school. We go to the central square. We eat baursak, which is currently on our table as well.
Yeah.
We drink Nauryz, which is free for everybody attending the square. We hear concerts, we hear music, and etc. And I think that made it feel like a real celebration. Back home, of course, we had our family together, and my mom does always cook Nauryz as well. But I think as a child, I remember Nauryz as something when you go out,
Yeah.
as something
Same.
where you visit, you go maybe to guests or visit like big celebrations. And especially because in Almaty it's very warm.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Like, you guys are lucky in Almaty. You can go out in the middle of
Yes.
March.
Yeah.
In Astana, it's
Not
a little
like
bit different.
us.
You can never expect, like, you can never count on a good weather because it can change like overnight, you know.
Yeah. And I remember a story that I once asked my mom, like, how did you celebrate, our holidays, including Nauryz? And she, as a woman who was born in 1960s and studied university with my dad, she was like, we did not celebrate it. And it wasn't until my university years that I realized and I knew that Nauryz was actually banned during the Soviet Union period. So there was the Soviet government didn't allow people to practice their own traditions. So I think that it's a very interesting story of us, of our parents who did not celebrate it, but still we are eager to celebrate now. So it's a bit of reconnection, between past and our future self, our current selves.
And you brought up Soviet Union, and I wonder, are there any traditions in your family that you think shaped you as a person, your identity as a Kazakh woman, or just as a person in general, not necessarily inclined with, national pride or national tradition?
You know what? When you said about Kazakh identity and Nauryz, I remember that during the Nauryz, in general, we had a neighbor. She was Russian by her ethnicity, and we were really close actually. So what happened during Nauryz is that we had a custom of giving her baursak to her and her family. And she had a custom of giving, during the Christian holidays, giving this bread that they do. So it was an exchange. And you know what? When you said about Kazakh identity, our traditions that shape us, I think that small gesture of our family and her family, it was kind of showcasing both hospitality and also, I think, the friendship that we have. So yes, we were different. We had different identities. We had different national identities. We had different maybe religious identities. But that didn't stop us from being friends and interacting. And actually, that's how I know about some Christian holidays. And that's how she knows about Nauryz, or what does it mean, or how to make the soup, Nauryz and etc.
It really resonates with me because my family, I come from a family which is not really tied to traditions. Again, breathing out my background one more time, I grew up in Kostanai, which is, a more, the time when I was growing up there, there were more Russian ethnicities, if I may say so. Russian speaking ethnicities. My first language was Russian. So, but what I remember from my childhood is that despite that we had different ethnicities, we shared different languages, there was always this, it's not a hospitality, but it's openness. And that's, I think, what shaped me as a person. Maybe it is a tradition. Maybe I can call it a tradition. Maybe it's a way of life, but yeah.
But I think what Aybushin pointed out is this shared vision of how traditions, a part of our life, and also we can incorporate other traditions of other nationalities into our life. And it's a kind of a nice touch on the way people interact with each other. And I think it's when we talk about Kazakh identity, I think it would be a nice transition to this topic. I see Kazakhs, like you said, also open to new ideas, to new things, to cultures. And at the same time, I see Kazakh people as those who are open, but at the same time, they're able to preserve the core of their identities as much as possible without having any disregard to any other ethnicities, nationalities, holidays. So I don't know what you guys think about that, whether you agree or not with the way I think in general Kazakh identity is at this very moment in time.
Can I just jump back to one point that I wanted to mention about Nauryz as well? Is this openness? It's very important, I think, at this moment when the borders are blurred, globalization is happening, all the in every place we have internet, which makes things so much easier. But it's very important to keep some traditions that are not borrowed or imported, but that are ours. So I think Nauryz is one of those traditions, and what I can see now from people around, from my close friends, and from the national level landscape, is that there is so much more attention to Nauryz in general. I'm not sure what it is tied to. Because maybe it is a part of the effort to reconnect to our past, which was, suppressed for more than 70 years in the Soviet Union. But I can see how openness it is. We can be open, but still we can try to preserve what is truly ours. And I think Nauryz is what is truly ours.
And I think when people really know who they are able to preserve what is important for them, traditions, beliefs, I don't know, language,
Yeah.
Music, culture in general, even like clothing. They are more able to respect others' identities.
Exactly.
Yes,
Exactly.
you're right. And also, I think be free of certain prejudices, because we do have this concept of other sometimes, right? And I think sharing traditions is part of when we get rid of prejudice and actually try to learn who that person is, whether he's from other country, other ethnicity, religion, etc. And I want to add to Asia's point about the way that Nauryz is now spreading out more, and probably it's part of our freedom to express our own identity. I think I would add to that it also unites us with a wider Turkic region,
Yes.
because Nauryz is not only celebrated among Kazakhs, it also celebrated in Uzbekistan, in Iran,
Yes.
I think several other countries, so Central Asian countries, and a little bit wider Turkic Persian world. And I think for many years we've been this part of the Soviet Union, and this kind of heritage still lingers among us, because we might be perceived as post-Soviet and etc. But I think this, as we open up this closeness with other Turkic nations, other Central Asian nations, it also helps to build our Turkic identity, not just post-Soviet identity.
And it's interesting too, if we remember that Nauryz isn't a new holiday, it dates back to the period of Zoroastrianism, if I'm not mistaken, which is like centuries ago, thousands of years ago. And despite that, our countries, those countries that are celebrating Nauryz, have passed through so many different periods. There was challenging periods in history, but still they kept Nauryz. I mean, even despite those 60, 70 years of not celebrating Nauryz, they still kept, and they are keeping the celebration. And what I think is the reason why Nauryz is still the thing today. I mean, despite that it's centuries old holiday.
I think it's tied to the spring.
Oh,
It's tied to, like, in my personal opinion, awakening of the nature. Because I think this holiday was so closely related to the lifestyle of nomadic people. The first thing people asked each other on the first day of Nauryz is, are you well? Is
Yeah,
your
exactly.
livestock is well? Were you able to get out of the winter? Okay. I mean, I'm translating roughly what, it's how it sounds in Kazakh. And, I have a question about Kazakh identity, whether any identity. Do you think it's something you are born with, or you grew up with, and then you become, this person, and you acquire some of the features of the identity?
Wow,
Good question.
that's such a difficult question that I think I was struggling for many many years because my first language was Russian, and my knowledge of Kazakh was, at school. I had A in my Kazakh language just because I'm a good student, an A student, but I didn't really know Kazakh. I mean, to speak it fluently. And it wasn't until I moved to Astana that I realized that I truly want to learn Kazakh. And this issue, and
And
again,
what was the reason that you wanted to learn it?
I don't know, it just felt, I felt this pulse and impulse inside, and I started to see more Kazakh speaking Kazakh because again, I'm from Kostanai, where back at the time, I mean 90s, 2000s, I heard Russian everywhere. There were so few people speaking Kazakh, and speaking Kazakh wasn't like natural for me because speaking Russian was natural for me. And because language is so tied to identity, and I think that was a core point of my identity crisis. And only when I moved to Astana, I enrolled in the university, started to meet people who were fluent in Kazakh, and I saw this rising, interest among people, not only those who speak fluent Kazakh, but also who struggle like me to learn Kazakh. And that's when I realized, well, that's not actually a point that I was struggling. My ability to speak Kazakh doesn't define me as Kazakh. It doesn't make me less Kazakh or more Kazakh, because I can be and feel Kazakh in many more different ways.
Yes.
And that's what just stuck in my head, and I was like, wow, yeah.
Oh,
So
you mean like whether you know Kazakh or not, you still can feel Kazakh?
Yeah, exactly.
I agree with you.
Exactly.
language is only part of identity. Yeah.
But at the same time, it's good to know language at least like on some level, because of course, all of us, Aibashan knows it better than me and Asil, I guess, right?
Yeah, right.
But I mean, there are some Kazakh people who don't know, like, their
At all.
knowledge is like zero of Kazakh
Yeah.
language.
Yeah.
So for us, it's easier because, for example, I will share my story. I grew up also, my first language, it was Russian, and I think it's mostly because of the academic life, because I went to Russian language school. So I've spent a lot of time reading and learning in Russian. So I think it's natural that it became so ingrained in my brain. But at the same time, my mom is very fluent, and her Kazakh is beautiful. She can write poems, it's
Wow.
amazing. So I grew up with like two languages in my house. My mom often spoke to me in Kazakh, and I would, sometimes even reply back in Kazakh. Now I even learn more with my mom, the Kazakh language. So I think we kind of a little bit different, because I'm sure when you came to Astana, you knew some Kazakh,
Yes.
at least. Yeah.
Well, to give you my perspective, yes, I grew up in a Kazakh speaking family. I went to Kazakh language school. So I think when it comes to Kazakh language, I know for many people it's a very sensitive topic.
Yes.
Why? Because I think I should give our viewers some background on the Kazakh language. So, according to my mom and her friends, when they first moved to Almaty back in the Soviet Union, they were speaking Kazakh language wasn't very well accepted,
Especially in the public places.
Yes,
Not
yes.
only in Almaty.
If you want to be considered an intellectual, you should definitely know Russian language. So because of that, when Kazakhstan gained independence, and there is a lot of a large portion of our population actually does speak Kazakh. There is a not larger, but also large portion of population who speak only Kazakh and not speak Russian very well. So when we gained our independence, the thing is, some Kazakhs wanted to speak Kazakh language freely. They wanted to embrace it, but with that sometimes came shaming of
Exactly.
people of Kazakhs who didn't know Kazakh language. And I personally don't agree with that at all, because from my experience, I never wanted to do something out of shame. Doing something out of shame is very hard. So if someone shames a person upon the fact that he doesn't know certain language, I don't think he or she would want to learn that language.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think actually what would work in our society is encouraging people to speak language by, noticing small things and not noticing, mistakes and be like, oh my God, Aida, it's not like that in
You
Kazakh.
have an
It's
accent,
actually,
yeah.
or you have an accent. It's actually saying, oh wow, your Kazakh is improving, or oh, you know that word, oh, you can speak as you can,
Yeah.
and you're doing your best, right? So
Exactly,
I
yeah.
think that's a good approach to this language.
I think I was quite lucky because I had and I have such a supportive friends who don't shame but who encourage, supportive relatives who say like, "Oh, your Kazakh is very well," and I had like my acquaintances who said to me, "Oh, you speak so good Kazakh," and I was like, "Oh, really?" That's such a great compliment for me who is still in the process of learning the language.
And actually, I like when you ask me sometimes, am I saying this right or am I writing this
Because
right?
I'm not afraid that you will shame me, you know?
Yes, and I
that's the
like
reason.
that to see your this like curiosity
yeah.
and
Yeah.
actually
And effort.
wanting to learn something. Yeah.
Because I think yes, it's the effort and the trying that matters, not the perfect knowledge of the language.
So, answering to your questions about the identity, also, I wanted to add, I grew up with a firm belief that you are born with identity. That's what I have been taught in school. And I think in the traditional Kazakh language schools, Kazakh identity is something you should be proud of. You should really held. It's in your blood, being Kazakh in your blood, being nomad, and etc. And I grew up with that kind of perception. But at the same time, I think now, I wanted to give an example of sportsmen from Kazakhstan, like Gennady Golovkin, for example, or Rybakin, a tennis player. They are not ethnic Kazakhs.
Some of them are
not from. They were not born
We're not
in
even
Kazakhstan.
born in
Yeah.
Kazakhstan.
Yes, but the way they represent Kazakhstan and the way ethnic Kazakhs support them and even call them as like Kazakh.
Our Kazakh people.
Yes. I think that makes this identity thing a little bit looser. And I know, I think still I would answering like directly, I would say you are born with an identity. But at the same time, I don't think you should stick to that so much that it just hinders you from accepting people or embracing people of other nationalities who live in Kazakhstan and vice versa.
Well, this is a good transition to my
Yeah.
question about multicultural and multinational society we're living in. And it's
Ooh.
true. And it not only right now the nationalities that ended up on this land because of the some policies of the Soviet Union. There are people who are moving to independent Kazakhstan at this very moment. International students coming to Nazarbayev University, deciding to stay here,
Yeah.
and starting families here with Kazakh women or Kazakh men, and etc. Or Kazakhstani men from Kazakhstan, Kazakh citizens. What do you think about the holiday Nauryz? How do you think it brings our nationalities, different nationalities together, or it kind of, dilutes Kazakh identity?
Well, I think every holiday unites people because it's a gathering. It's a moment when we can feel joy and be happy for some good things in life. And because you mentioned like Nauryz is about renewal and we have spring coming, still coming, still coming. So
Just to let our listeners know, it's very windy and it's very snowy in Astana.
because it's
in
spring,
March.
spring coming, and people feel this, inspiration, and I think they feel hope. And oftentimes, holiday brings hope, and that's what Nauryz is about. And I think that's very much unites our people. And despite we can have different personal identities, national identities, but that's what makes us one. belong to each other. And you know, I love this thing about Kazakhstan is that despite where you come from or your ethnicity or your language, everyone will congratulate you on the holiday that you are celebrating, be it Nauryz or Oraza, the end of Ramadan, right? Be it the Christian holidays, Orthodox holidays. Everyone congratulates because of the deep respect and this deep mutual understanding, I think, between people here in the country.
But I might not be politically correct right now when I will say that I think the trend, this kind of trend and this kind of tone for the relationship was set by Kazakh people. I just, I really think that Kazakh people in their way of, dealing with, people who were exiled to Kazakhstan, for
Yes.
example, they didn't have a great life here also, but they were able to help those who were, just taken abruptly from their land, from
Yeah.
their houses, and brought to Kazakhstan. They recognize, I think the nomadic lifestyle in general recognizes that it's sometimes very harsh to survive. That's why you try to help others as much as possible. So yeah, I think this tone was set by Kazakh people and then just, taken by other nationalities. And like Aybushin said about Kazakh language, through positive encouragement, reinforcement, I think it builds stronger foundation rather than through shame or
Yeah.
oh, you're not respecting Nauryz or you're not sharing our holidays. I think just letting others be and do what they feel works best for them creates this kind of environment where people can actually open up and be really friendly with each other. And
And I
So-
remember those, sorry.
On this point, I just want to, in my opinion, I'm more of a neutral person in terms of what characteristics belong to certain nation. And I think maybe I would a little bit disagree with you on that, but I think in any nation there are open people, there are tolerant people, and there are not so tolerant people, and that can be other nationalities living in Kazakhstan as well.
Yeah, that's true.
And
But
just to highlight, I think the nations who have moved here, whether through historic terms or in independent Kazakhstan, they also had to accept and to embrace something that was once new to them. So I think we should highlight that as well.
yeah, the stories, that we were taught at schools of Kazakh people helping those people who were forcibly deported to the country. It always touched my heart so deeply, even when the person himself or herself is trying to make the ends meet, and still this eagerness to help others, it just tells a lot about people themselves, and that's what really that's always touched my heart. Yeah.
I also wanted to touch upon one thing when we talk about traditions and identity. I know up to this point, we've talked mostly positively about whether identity or traditions, but do you think, don't you think that our identity sometimes can put us in a box? Because one example is a language, right? Someone might say, oh, you're Kazakh, then why don't you speak Kazakh? It's already kind of box. So with identity, with national identity, there sometimes comes an expectation to behave certain way, to speak certain way, even to dress certain way. So what do you think about? Do you notice certain things that you feel yourself a little bit restrained because you are Kazakh, and how the society perceives being a Kazakh?
No, I don't feel restrained at all. I mean, it's just we are lucky to live in this world, in these current times when we have freedom to express ourselves the way we want. And looking at young people, I mean, people younger than me, I'm really admiring at their way of expressing themselves. Because some things, even though I don't feel restrained, but still some things I'm thinking, oh, maybe it's okay, maybe it's not okay. But for the younger population, they're very creative, they're very enthusiastic about their identity and about expressing their traditions and not feeling restrained at all.
I
What
agree
about
with
you?
Ibershan that it can happen, and there are things that kind of put us in the box and restrain us from the way we would like maybe to behave ourselves. I will speak only from my personal experience. I grew up in a family where we are three daughters, and of course, our father really wanted to have a son, but with God's will, he didn't. So he had three daughters, but he brought us up with the knowledge that we can do anything, we can achieve anything. We like the first thing for us is our self realization, first of all, because we're human beings and we have a brain and we
Hmm.
actually like really need to put ourselves into work and realize what we would like to do with our lives. But that's my personal story of how I grew up. But then when I sometimes go out into the world, even now when I'm like over 30 years old and I'm an adult person, I feel sometimes that there are certain things that are expected from, for example, from a Kazakh woman, that I
Yeah.
Yes.
sometimes do not fit into that box, as Ibershan said. And I feel more like you, I said. I
Hmm.
feel like it's not about me, it's about other people's expectations. But I agree with Ibershan that we need to acknowledge that this kind of expectations, whether to women, even to men, to Kazakh men, um, they exist. We cannot say that, oh, they're not. Still, Kazakh people are very traditional, and I think because of globalization, like you said
Hmm.
before, people sometimes are afraid of losing their identity, or losing something which is very traditional, very Kazakh. But what I see from the perspective of the history, and I always say, like, why people are getting worried sometimes and getting so, I don't know, like against new things sometimes.
Hmm.
And I will talk about more about being against new things or being pro new things, uh, because Kazakh people, have lived through centuries of different kind of historical settings, but still were able to
Yes.
preserve a lot of what traditional Kazakh. So I don't think we should be super afraid of what globalization is bringing to us. And I will bring a new point that I would like to hear your thoughts on. What during the course of my work at the Astana Times, I interview different, investors, politicians, foreigners, mostly foreigners, and they often say that they see Kazakhstan as South Korea of Central Asia
Oh, really?
because of our openness to new digital tools, AI. We're so much into it. We embrace it very quickly. So I don't know what you guys think, but that's what I like about Kazakh people. And I enjoy myself all this new digital things and new tools. I don't know where it's coming from, why we like it so much, because I know that there are many, countries in the world, even like Europe, for example, they're wary of new things. They're wary of their personal data. They always think about, the other side of the coin. So, what do you guys
Well,
think?
I don't think Kazakhstan is the South Korea of Central Asia because Kazakhstan is Kazakhstan
Mm-hmm.
and it's developing in its own way. But you're right saying that digitalization and this digital transformation is one of the things that we are very successful in, and we compare to other countries, let it be Europe. And I heard so many stories of my friends going to Europe and saying like, they still use cash or they don't have these banking apps that allow us to transfer money in seconds or in minutes. And I was like, well, definitely we are well ahead of them. But about openness, this is what I like about Kazakhstan in generally, that I think we take the best from many examples all over the world, but still we are trying to be like to be ourselves. And that's a good thing because we don't have to reinvent the wheel. So many things are already existing in the world, and we just need to learn from best examples, but still, still
Incorporate them.
remain
Yeah.
ourselves, incorporate them. Yeah.
Yeah, and not only digital things. I like how even like we're dressed right now. I love Ibershan's this necklace that she has.
Yeah,
It
it's
has a
beautiful.
very traditional Kazakh ornament, but it looks very at the same time modern and very classy, very stylish. And You guys will agree with me, I think,
Yeah.
if you say if you will like I see a lot of women and even men at the moment who are incorporating this kind of small national touches in terms of clothes, in terms of like even like there are some cases for iPhones with like, you know, I don't know, like your tribe or some ornament. And I like that because it not necessarily like brings you backwards, but
No, yeah.
you move forward, taking something very important for you forward.
And that's a very really interesting point to make, and that brings us to a very important theme that I also wanted to mention about young people. So much more embracing the cultural themes. It can be clothing, it can be music, it can be, I don't know, filming
Art,
some Nauryz
film.
and putting it on TikTok, let's say, or some art and films. So many things happening, and they're embracing it with so much eagerness. And even us, I mean, the different generations are going this way.
Yeah, when you said about the South Korean phenomenon, the first thing came to my mind was about the pop culture, music, and
also.
Yeah,
films.
exactly.
So that's what first came to my mind. And I think in Kazakhstan, there is a certain trend of also showcasing this identity through music by making Kazakh language pop music popular. And we have a lot of listeners
Yeah.
already through films.
Mhm.
I think, well, last year I wrote a lot about one film, Bauna Salu, which talks about Kazakh tradition, or, you know, even like comedies, Kazakh comedies, which not everybody is fan of,
Yeah.
including myself.
Me too.
But I think there is certain element of Kazakh identity in those comedies. For example, in one of the films by Nurlan Koyambayev, they showed Kazakh business in India, and they showed how Kazakhs celebrate weddings for many, many days, and they compared it to Indian weddings. And I think those kind of touches, they actually make our own people feel very related in films, in music, and etc., and even in arts. I know a couple of artists who include certain Kazakh elements. For example, I wrote recently about Alps by Kazgulov. And previously, I didn't see his art, but while writing, I saw the steps, the horses, the traditional Kazakh life, and it wasn't like just about that. It was modern art, but it did have some elements of Kazakh identity, which I think is also great.
And why aren't you a fan of Kazakh movies? I mean, do they represent identities differently? Or
The comedies. I meant the comedies.
why?
um, you
Comedies
know,
are fun, right? I mean,
for me, they're okay. I'll give you my honest opinion. For me, they are more like one-time films.
okay.
Not all of them. Not all of them. Don't come at me.
Okay.
But I think it's they're just fun, and like you can watch it with your family in cinemas and forget about them. Most of them, not all of them. I know there are good Kazakh films.
Yeah.
So Kazakh film industry is growing, and it's very good. There are even some noir films.
I love noir films in general.
What are they?
Dark Men was very, you know, popular even in the West, not only in Kazakhstan. It's very interesting type of movies that more not necessarily about the plot. They're not plot driven, but they're driven with emotions, the immersive atmosphere, the colors that the director chooses. I love in general noir movies, and I tend to see less movies in general because I think they're becoming more commercially driven rather than
Yeah.
really telling
That's-
some
that's
story.
another
So
point
it's
about
very
comedies.
difficult right now to talk about film industry in general, and
Yeah.
Kazakhstan is, you know, trying to make itself known.
You know about the noir films? I was told that they're actually more popular outside of Kazakhstan because there is an audience who is ready and who can understand those films. And one of the producers I interviewed, she said that in Kazakhstan, It's just the audience is not ready yet.
Like the
But
mass
we're
audience.
still, the mass audience. So that's just a small point about noir films.
Can we talk about Q? Because she said about South Korea and
Yeah.
Kazakhstan.
I
in
also
parallel,
thought about that.
the
Yeah.
Q-pop.
Yes.
Who will be able to share it more in depth?
Well, I wrote a story a few years ago about 91 band. Well, I wasn't a fan of them at first. I was like, interesting band. They were like K-pop or Q-pop because I wasn't really sure what does that mean. But when I started writing the story, I started digging deeper, listening to their music, to their words, watching their clips, and I was like, wow, they're doing such a great job. And I think 91, like a band, was one of those first, if I may say so, bands who gave this renaissance to Kazakh culture and Kazakh music. Because with them, I saw so many people starting listening Kazakh language music, and the way that they do music, their music is so inspiring, so cheerful, and the words, the lyrics,
The message.
the message, yeah, and the types of music, the genre of music that they use, it's not only pop because we had one singer who rapped there, who did rap. So it again showcases that Kazakh music can be so diverse. It can be pop, it can be rap, it can be ethno, playing some our national instruments. And I think that was the time when this Q-pop wave started to become bigger with 91 band.
Yeah, I don't think it's also about copying anything.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
We've talked about globalization, right? And like pop music
It's
is pop music
postmodernism.
everywhere.
It's
yeah.
postmodernism.
Yeah.
I mean, you can
We just
escape
bring
it.
our own something into that, and that makes it Kazakh.
And I listen to Kazakh music a lot. And
Me
I remember
too.
when I'm a little bit older than you guys, but I remember the time when Kazakh language music I could only listen to it after midnight on the radio, before iPods, before iPhones. Young listeners, I'm old enough. I remember having CD discs and etc. So I'm very happy right now that I have, so many Kazakh language singers and bands on my Spotify, and they're becoming soundtracks of my happy moments, sad moments, which I think is so important, because the beauty of music that you take it everywhere
Yeah.
with you, and it's kind of like accompanies you through beautiful moments, through sad moments. And I'm happy that I'm a Kazakh woman, can listen to a Kazakh language songs, so it warms my heart.
And I think Kazakh art in general, it just conveys such a different narrative of the country, and breaking some older stereotypes about the country. Because, just recently I did a story about this series up and coming about Joshi Khan, which is the eldest son of the Genghis Khan, one of the brutal leaders back in the years. And I like their point that they were making is that one of the goals of this series is to show the personal story of Joshi Khan, but also to break, the old narrative of Kazakhstan being post-Soviet. I mean, the phrase that I don't really like, this post-Soviet, because we are independent country, and this narrative is very important, and that's what these bands, these artists are doing, I think.
I think it's important for us to include the works that you've mentioned, both as Ibarshin and you, the pieces that you've discussed, so our listeners can actually, read through them.
Yeah. So if we talk about general, about identity and Nauryz and traditions, still, I'm wondering, like, what makes you feel like Kazakh nowadays? Now, if we don't, go back to the past or to the future, but at the present moment.
Oh, you mean like you wanted to say it for like you want us to say it in one word, or we can expand?
You can expand.
But it's something that you need to think about, because I remember when I was studying in the United States, and it was so weird for me because I've left to the United States when I was 17 years old. When I left, I never ate horse meat. Like, it was something like,
How
why are we
so?
eating horse meat? I was very young. I've spent 2 years in the United States. The first 2 years, in general, I was 6 years, but after 2 years being in the States, I came back home and I told my mom, please cook bishvermak. And I remember the first time I was eating horse meat was with some, like, it was so tasteful. It was something that was like, it's mine. I understand it. And also I miss the wind and I miss the steppes. For me, Kazakhstan, like, I love Burabai. I've, grew up close to it. I love Shimbulak in Almaty. But when I remember I took a trip last year with ex-US ambassador to Kazakh to see Aral Sea, and I remember being in Kazakh steppe. It's unbelievable. It makes you feel something you can't even put into words, and that what's Kazakh for me. It's some feeling of freedom, endless, just unparalleled freedom,
Like steppe.
like a wind in the steppe.
Wow.
Well, I grew up in a mountainous city. So when you ask the question, what makes you feel Kazakh? The first thing that came to my mind was language. And I think, honestly, nowadays, I don't speak Kazakh very often. It happens that my friends, my colleagues are mostly Russian speaking. And I do have some,
Like us.
yes,
Right.
I do have some Kazakh speaking friends and my family, and I speak Kazakh in my family. But I kind of miss times when I was at school and when I spoke Kazakh, like almost
Every day.
every day, like in all the
Yeah.
conversations. And it's different because I think there are certain things when you grew up speaking Kazakh, even the jokes are different.
Yeah, sure.
Of course, it's the subtleties of the language.
Yes, and sometimes I miss that because now my environment is less so Kazakh speaking, and I know it's kind of my fault also. Nobody prevents me from speaking Kazakh, but I think nowadays, even when I go abroad, when I hear someone speak Kazakh language,
Exactly.
it
This feeling.
instantly, it
Yeah.
makes me like, oh my
Same.
God, we are friends,
Same
we
here.
are family. So for me, it's language. What makes me Kazakh is Kazakh language.
And I think that I want to,
What about you?
well, I think it's just my passport because I love our passport and this feeling. I couldn't describe it in one word, but I have this deep feeling, warm feeling of having my family here in Kazakhstan, having my friends, being born here, living, and developing personally and professionally, and that's what makes me feel Kazakh, I think. Yeah.
Do you think that if one day you move to another country and you love it there and your family is with you and you have friends there, do you think you can exchange that feeling?
No, I wouldn't think I would change the citizenship, change my passport for any reason, because I think that's what makes me overall. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So to wrap up the conversation that we had, and I know we could be talking for hours about this very interesting topic, I want to just jump back to our tradition inspired by one of our favorite podcasts, where we ask and we come up with a question to ask our next guest, right? So what would be the question, Alex?
I think about maybe, are you born with your identity or you are growing into your identity? What do
I
you
love
guys think?
that. I love
Yeah,
that.
I think we should definitely keep that in mind to ask our next guest in our next podcast.
So I had a great pleasure, girls, with
Oh, me
you.
too.
I think
Yeah.
we can now.
Now
And I
let's
wanna
eat
eat
those
some
balsams.
No,
balsams.
now we're eating. We will drink our tea ourselves. Remember this
Yeah.
this funny thing.
It was a
Yes.
Yeah,
Exactly.
It's a
right?